From the migrant caravan to separated families, the Trump administration's immigration actions have drawn a fresh focus on the U.S. asylum process.
The U.S. is very much a popular destination because it has been our country's tradition. We have laws, and it's our culture. It's the way we've long done business.
Asylum is granted to individuals who have fled their native country and need international protection because of a fear of persecution for 5 unchangeable reasons: their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a social group.
The important thing there is that persecution has to be happening on account of one of those 5 grounds.
Asylum seekers come from countries all over the globe, and there has been a marked increase in people coming from Central America in recent years. Out of all the individuals granted asylum in 2016, the 3 countries of origin with the highest number of cases were China, El Salvador, and Guatemala. But in contrast to refugees, who apply for refugee status from outside the U.S., asylum seekers are either seeking admission at a legal port of entry or are already in the country, either legally or illegally. Many asylum seekers come to the U.S. to apply for protection because the refugee process from abroad can take years, and even then only grants a limited number of refugee resettlement requests. And under the Trump administration, those numbers have been slashed, down to 45,000 in 2018. And their odds of success are somewhat higher with the U.S. asylum process.
The Supreme Court has ruled that all persons in the U.S., whether temporarily, unlawfully, or permanently, have a right to due process in removal proceedings. So because of the protections under U.S. laws, someone applying for asylum would be in a much better position to hopefully have their case granted.
But due process for foreign nationals is something Trump has decried, and his administration is whittling away at rules designed to preserve it.
The asylum system is being abused to the detriment of the rule of law.
Here's how the asylum system has worked in the past. An asylum seeker initiates the process in one of 3 ways. First, by submitting an affirmative asylum application within 1 year of entering the U.S. legally. Second, by requesting asylum at the border. Or third, by submitting a defensive asylum application after being apprehended for an immigration violation. The system varies depending on how the asylum process is initiated, and involves a complicated web of paperwork, interviews, detentions or paroles, appeals, and immigration court hearings. It ultimately results in an affirmative decision from an asylum officer at U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, which is within the Department of Homeland Security. A negative decision from one of those asylum officers. An affirmative decision from an immigration judge, which is overseen by the Justice Department, or a denial from that judge, which can then be appealed up the ladder, or result in deportation. The complex system has led to cases that can stretch for months, even years, just between steps. At the beginning of 2018, it had created a backlog of more than 300,000 asylum cases.
During that time period, they can be left in limbo. They don't really have status. What they do have is the ability to stay in the country and not be returned.
Now the Trump administration is setting up roadblocks in front of some of those steps in the asylum process. They're saying that they are targeting the immigration court backlog and weeding out fraudulent asylum claims. To do so, they're no longer considering gang violence or domestic violence as grounds for asylum. The administration has prioritized processing new asylum applications over old ones, meaning that new asylum seekers have less time to find a lawyer or prepare their documents for interviews and hearings. They're attempting to overturn a ruling requiring families to be released after 20 days of detention while they await their proceedings. And immigrants trying to claim asylum at a point of entry, like the migrant caravan, are being told that U.S. facilities are full and are turned away to wait, or to cross the border illegally and get ensnared in the administration's zero-tolerance crackdown.
It's a real struggle. The landscape changes probably day to day on a policy level. And clients, in some instances, have voluntarily said they will depart this country because they just don't have any real hope that at the end of the day that they will be allowed to stay here. And of course, you now have parents who are no longer with their children. They're not sure where their children are. They're not sure when they're going to be reunified with their children.
One of the biggest factors in a case's success is whether or not an asylum seeker is represented by a lawyer. Even though they have a right to due process, they don't have a right to a public defender. In 2017, FOIA information showed that immigration judges rejected 90% of unrepresented cases, versus 54% of represented ones.
Representing yourself in removal proceedings is very difficult.
We often see way too many people, sometimes even children, going alone in this process, which is complicated, even for those of us who do it.
Without a lawyer, the likelihood grows that an asylum seeker will be deported and sent back to the impoverished, dangerous country they fled.